When you hear the name Madden, chances are one of two images pop into people's minds. A few see John Madden, former coach of the Oakland Raiders and legendary football broadcaster. But for everyone else, they instantly think of EA Sports' hit video game franchise, Madden NFL, a genre-defining juggernaut. For years, EA Sports has dominated the video game industry, giving its competition the stiff arm by not only producing high-quality titles, but also by locking up exclusive contracts to keep its rivals from even making it onto the field. But just how did EA Sports make it to number one? In the early 1980s, Trip Hawkins left his position as Director of Strategy and Marketing at Apple to find success with his new computer game company, Electronic Arts. Electronic Arts' business philosophy put special emphasis on the designers of its products, the electronic artists themselves. Consumers responded by handing the company dollars by the fistful for each new game it released. In 1983, programmer Eric Hammond worked with Hawkins and EA to release the company's first sports game, Julius Erving and Larry Bird One-on-One. Released for the Apple II and later ported to the Commodore 64 and other platforms, One-on-One broke ground as the first video game to be endorsed by sports celebrities and to feature their licensed likeness. For such a simple-looking game, One-on-One offered a surprising amount of detail. Gamers had a full range of offensive and defensive moves at their disposal, including dunks, spins, steals, and blocks. The player's fatigue bar needed replenishing as each match went on. If Dr. J or Bird didn't call the occasional timeout or stop to dribble for a moment, their on-screen avatars would start to move sluggishly and miss shots and blocks. The characters could even shatter the backboard if they dunked too many times. To the delight of players, broken backboards prompted an angry janitor onto the court to mutter curses while he cleaned up the mess. One-on-One was a success, earning great reviews and sales, just as the video game industry imploded in 1983. Electronic Arts' first step into the world of sports was an early sign of the great things still yet to come. Two programmers at EA, Evan and Nikki Robinson, created EA's next sports title, World Tour Golf, which came out in 1986 for the Commodore 64, Amiga, Apple II, and MS-DOS computers. It offered players the most accurate recreations of real-world golf courses that the era's hardware could manage. World Tour Golf also featured the first in-game course editor, giving gamers the chance to make their games as realistic or insane as they wanted. Electronic Arts once again earned glowing reviews and great sales for their efforts, and the company wanted to keep the hits coming. For that, they'd turn to a pioneer of sports video games. Don Daglow, the producer at EA who helped guide World Tour Golf's production, is a self-confessed baseball nut. While a student at Pomona College in Claremont, California in 1971, he created the very first baseball simulator for the PDP-10 mainframe computer. The game wasn't too much to look at, though, said Daglow in an interview with Machinima.
Calling it a video game would be a stretch, because of course back then all we had was text, and it was printing on flimsy paper that was only about 2 grades better than toilet paper that went through these really slow ancient printers.
Despite those shortcomings, however, the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York has it on record as the first ever baseball computer game. After he graduated, Daglow started working in the game industry, teaming up with fellow Pomona alum, programmer Eddie Dombrower, to create Intellivision World Series Baseball for Mattel in 1983. The game improved on Daglow's earlier game with colorful graphics and multiple camera angles. However, Mattel didn't want to spend the money on acquiring the MLB license, says Daglow, resulting in players being named after other game programmers. Worse, the stats simulator the duo had wanted to include was scrapped too. But shortly after Mattel's game was published, Daglow was hired by EA as a producer in 1983. And while World Tour Golf was in the works, Daglow once again teamed with Dombrower to create a brand new title, Earl Weaver Baseball. Based on his winning reputation and his penchant for making trouble, Earl Weaver might as well have stepped out of the video game himself. In addition to leading the Baltimore Orioles to 6 division titles, 4 American League pennants, and a World Series championship, Weaver was famous for getting booted from games after getting into blowout arguments with umpires. Though Earl Weaver isn't a household name among non-baseball fans, Daglow says the staff at EA was unanimous in choosing the Orioles skipper to headline the game.
Weaver was our first choice because as of '83, he was He had written the book on strategy. He was the first one to start using head-to-head stats in baseball in the dugout. He was a colorful figure, and he was a guy who seemed destined for the Hall of Fame, so that we were dealing with somebody who was very strong. So for all those reasons, it seemed like he would be a good choice.
Working with the coach paid off. Players had gotten the baseball game they never realized was possible. Real-life stadiums were digitally recreated, and the Amiga version even featured an announcer that read out the names of each batter as he stepped up to the plate. Players could control the game as managers directing their teams, or could take control of the pitchers and batters directly. And like World Tour Golf before it, players had the ability to edit stadiums, teams, and even players, offering the kinds of options and controls that had never been seen before. Critics and consumers loved it, with reviewers naming it the best baseball video game yet. Nearly a decade later, Earl Weaver Baseball even earned a spot in a 1996 issue of Computer Gaming World as one of the best 25 PC games of all time. EA Sports offerings had managed a hat trick with 3 solid, innovative titles in a row.
I think if you look at the best games in any category in the history of the industry, if you look down inside the teams so often, you will find that passion for the material and just a love of what people came to work every day loving what they were doing. I know Eddie had that. I know I had that. I know I felt that way about working with Eddie Dombrower. And I think that is something that's true of many of those titles over the year. Once you scratch the surface underneath, you'll see that passion.
Daglow and Dombrower had worked out the kinks of making a baseball video game on the Intellivision. By the time they'd gotten together with Coach Weaver, the two made it look easy. Meanwhile, EA founder Trip Hawkins and Joe Ibarra, his second-in-command, were tearing their hair out for over 3 years trying to get their new game, John Madden Football, into the end zone without fumbling along the way.
By 1983, Electronic Arts was on the rise in the computer game business. Its first sports game, Julius Erving and Larry Bird One-on-One, was a big success for the company and the industry as a whole. In addition to featuring great gameplay, it marked the first instance of celebrities licensing their likeness to appear in a video game. Hawkins was eager to replicate One-on-One's success and began looking to bring football to computer screens. At first, Hawkins approached the head coach of the University of California's football team, Joe Kapp, but ultimately, EA went with John Madden instead.
Originally, I went to Joe Kapp at Cal, thinking I just need some expert help, and wanted to save money. But when Joe asked for royalties, I decided that if I had to pay a lot, I should get Madden, who had much more public visibility and was, in my opinion, the best possible choice at the top of the food chain. I knew Madden was the perfect, durable brand because he was authentic, he had become a nationally branded entertainer on TV, and he knew how to explain football to the masses.
In 1984, Electronic Arts signed Madden, an NFL commentator and head coach of the 1976 champion Raiders, to a contract to endorse its new football game. But beyond just having Madden's face on the box, Hawkins needed the coach's football expertise. To get it, Hawkins and EA producer Joe Ibarra joined Madden on a 2-day train ride to pick his brain and find the best way to put pro football in the hands of everyday gamers.
I had things to fill in that I needed to ask John about. So the famous first meeting on the train was mostly me asking John questions for about 20 hours over a 2-day period while the train wound its way from Denver to Oakland. After that first meeting, there were periodic update meetings. For one of those, we went out to his home in Pleasanton. I remember that one well because he gave me a copy of his 1980 Raiders playbook and made it my problem to learn to design the plays from it.
But EA wasn't putting Madden's name on the box just for his knowledge and expertise. They were getting his personality too. And that, says Hawkins, the coach had in abundance.
John is a very smart guy and also very big and dominating. So you can see how he could command and control 60 large football players, which cannot be easy. John is also a great performer who stays in character when on TV. I found this remarkable because, in person, when he talks, every third word is the F word. But apparently he knows how to throw a switch and shut that off when it's showtime.
Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. Hawkins pitched the game as featuring 14 on-field players because of the limitations of the era's 8-bit computer technology. But Madden wouldn't have it. One of the coach's conditions for endorsing the game was that there were 22 players on the field. No exceptions. As it turned out, this caused major headaches for Hawkins, Ibarra, and programmer Robin Antoniuk.
Every pixel of collision detection of all 22 players could cause a sensible play to be useless, or a senseless play to be unstoppable. It was like a water bucket full of holes. The water just escaped, and all it took was one key flaw to ruin it. These flaws need to be solved at a systemic level. But Antonik had trouble building one, and we had to keep putting band-aids on specific plays.
When the deal was struck with Madden, development was projected to take 1 year. 1 year became 4. Inside the EA studio, John Madden Football became known as Trip's Folly.
It took forever, and I wouldn't let it die. So the reaction was entirely understandable.
Hawkins concedes. Finally, John Madden Football was released for the Apple II in 1988. While it wasn't a hit, it found moderate success in the market, and Hawkins wanted to bring the franchise back for more. After porting it to the PC and Commodore 64 in 1989, EA started on an upgraded Madden sequel for the upstart home console, the 16-bit Sega Genesis. Hawkins sought out the Genesis for its upgrade in power and its user base. Once again, the inspirations for annual iterations came from the Stratomatic's yearly updates that kept the tabletop game relevant for each season's crop of players. The original Madden could be updated with separately sold floppy disks. The transition to Genesis, though, would do away with floppy disk sales, meaning making and selling a new Madden cartridge every year. To bring the game from 8-bit to 16, EA brought help from outside. At first, they tried to make a deal with Bethesda Softworks to get a 16-bit code base for the game. But according to Hawkins, trying to work with the developer caused more problems than it solved. When the Bethesda deal didn't work out, EA gave the project to Park Place Productions instead. As it turned out, Park Place had just the right touch. One of the streamlining innovations, mapping each receiver to a different button on the controller, remains a genre standard to this day. But while the new game, slated for release in 1990, was poised for even greater success than the original, a brand new problem appeared. Sega had signed Joe Montana to an endorsement deal for a new game, but the project was going to miss its deadline.
Their project stalled and was going to miss Christmas. The CEO of Sega, Hayao Nakayama, called and asked me to sacrifice Madden in the interest of the Sega platform. He wanted me to take our codebase and turn it into Montana football for a flat fee, and have us cancel the release of Madden. I recall that marketing director Bing Gordon heard about this and thought it was a good idea to kill Madden and do Montana. I thought that was completely crazy because I knew Madden was going to be a flagship brand for us.
So Hawkins devised a way to turn Sega's problem into EA's solution. Do both games and make Madden the standout winner.
I quickly struck a deal with Sega. Both games were in the top 5 that Christmas. We made sure Madden was better. For example, we had over 100 plays in Madden, but only allowed 13 plays in Montana. Sega, however, could afford much more marketing, and they'd paid us $2 million for work that took a few guys a few weeks. It was a win-win.
John Madden Football launched Electronic Arts into the stratosphere and helped the company transition from computer game publisher to console game juggernaut. But as fans would soon discover, football was only the beginning. The Electronic Arts Sports Network, or EASN, unified all of the company's sports titles, the logo of which began to appear on game boxes in 1991. EA founder Trip Hawkins explained the rationale behind the new label in an exclusive email interview with Machinima.
Producers Don Traeger and Michael Kosaka were doing team basketball, such as Lakers vs. Celtics, and thought that since they had to present the teams and players and stats to start up a game, why not have it done by a fictional sports announcer for a fictional sports broadcasting network? Electronic Arts Sports Network was the obvious name to use. So all the other sports projects adopted EASN, and after a while it became the wrapper around other common brand elements that were shared by the sports games, and it moved to the front of the box and became the overall product line branding for sports. It later became EA Sports because ESPN was jealous and offered a lot of free TV ads if we would change it. So we did.
In an email interview with Machinima, Bing Gordon, EA's marketing director at the time, also shared his recollection of the EASN's inception back in 1991.
Michael Kosaka was art director for Lakers vs. Celtics. Goofing around, he created the title screen with the EASN logo banded diagonally across the screen. He asked Traeger what he thought, and Traeger asked art director Don Transith. They all loved it. So after much internal discussion, we finally went with it.
Along with its new logo, the brand had a memorable tagline: "If it's in the game, it's in the game." And for more than 2 decades, EA Sports had lived up to that boast, releasing titles and franchises that simulated just about every sport fans could expect, and even a few they wouldn't. In August of 1991, EA partnered with Park Place Productions, the developer behind the first 16-bit version of John Madden Football, to release NHL Hockey for the Sega Genesis. The game featured the National Hockey League's license, meaning the gamers could take control of actual professional teams and players on a quest for the Stanley Cup. Best of all, for hockey fans, the game featured honest-to-goodness mid-game brawls. The series grew in popularity and has remained an EA Sports mainstay with new installments on every generation of consoles each year. The NHL Hockey franchise was even featured in a few films in the 1990s, making appearances in Swingers and Mallrats and cementing EA Sports' reputation as the industry standard for sports video games. In 1992, EA released their first 16-bit golf game, PGA Tour Golf 2, for the Genesis. The first game in the series had first been released 2 years earlier for MS-DOS-based computers, with ports to the Genesis, Super Nintendo, Mac, and Amiga computers coming in 1991. Developed by Polygames, PGA Tour Golf 2 offered 60 pro golfers, high-quality graphics and sound, and detailed stats and ball physics. The title officially launched EA's yearly golf franchise that in 1999 became the Tiger Woods PGA Tour series. Meanwhile, EA had continued to publish basketball games, the first sport that the company had tackled way back in 1983's Julius Erving and Larry Bird one-on-one. In 1989, EA began publishing titles based on the previous year's postseason matchups, starting with Lakers vs. Celtics and the NBA playoffs. Even with the NBA license, the games in the Versus series only offered a limited number of teams, restricted to the 8 that had vied for the championship. After porting Lakers vs. Celtics to the Genesis in 1991, EA released Bulls vs. Lakers in 1992 and Bulls vs. Blazers in 1993. That same year, the company released the final game to use the Versus engine, NBA Showdown for the Super Nintendo, with a Genesis port in 1994. This was the first EA-published game to feature all 27 NBA teams, and also allowed gamers to play full seasons. A year later in 1994, EA Sports released NBA Live 95 for the Genesis and Super Nintendo, which was built on a brand new engine and became EA Sports' default basketball brand ever since. EA Sports also broadened their offerings to appeal to gamers globally, releasing FIFA International Soccer in 1993 for all major consoles. As the first soccer game to utilize the FIFA license, soccer fans the world over finally had the chance to take to the pitch in control of their favorite players. While the FIFA franchise had chugged along with new installments every year, in 1998, EA released a standalone game based on FIFA's World Cup tournament for the PlayStation and Nintendo 64 consoles. Like the yearly FIFA games, EA has released a new World Cup game to coincide with the tournament every 4 years. Finding success with gamers outside of the US, EA continued creating games based on sports with international followings. In 1994, they released IMG International Tour Tennis, with Rugby World Cup and Australian Rugby League published later that year. One of the franchises that helped pave the way for EA Sports had quietly died an inglorious death. Earl Weaver Baseball, the groundbreaking baseball sim created by Don Daglow and Eddie Dombrower, was planned to be released as Baseball 93 for the Genesis, but wound up getting axed. Ernest Adams was hired by EA in 1992 as a software engineer for the title, and he explains in an exclusive interview with Machinima why gamers never heard from Coach Weaver again.
The Weaver Code was, in my opinion, the most sophisticated baseball simulation available, better than any of its competition at generating credible baseball statistics for simulated games. But it was an aficionado's game, not an arcade game. I also think it would have been difficult to port it, since it was written in C to the Genesis. It would have required a complete rewrite, and the point of Baseball 93 was to springboard off the existing code base, thus saving a lot of time and money.
But programming and marketing issues weren't the only factors that led to the game's demise. The company's founder, Trip Hawkins, was making moves that would lead to his eventual departure from EA entirely.
Trip Hawkins was off making a new machine at his secret company, the San Mateo Software Group, later named 3DO. Madden was very much the flagship title even then, and EA had promised to put it on the 3DO multiplayer. So producer Scott Orr knew he was going to have to support the 3DO with Madden. I had written some comments on Eddie Dombrower's design for Baseball 93, and I also had experience at designing for CD-ROM-based devices from my previous job. So Scott asked me if I would design Madden for the 3DO, the first CD-ROM-based Madden. So I dropped Baseball 93 and moved to Madden 3DO, and became a game designer along the way.
America's pastime would eventually get its due in 1994's MLBPA Baseball, but the Madden football franchise became the jewel in EA Sports' crown, finally gaining the NFL licensing in 1994. That year, EA published Madden NFL 94, the first Madden game to feature real teams. The next year's Madden NFL 95 had snagged the license of the NFL Players Association, finally bringing the names of actual pro football stars to the franchise. The Madden brand grew each year, setting the standard for football video games across the industry. But in 2004, EA went from making the best football game in town to making the only football game in town.
While Sega and EA had successfully teamed up with John Madden Football on the Genesis system in the early 1990s, they couldn't see eye to eye about EA's Dreamcast presence. According to a 2009 Gamasutra article, Sega had already bet their sports fortunes on a California-based developer named Visual Concepts, buying it for $10 million prior to the system's launch. Ironically, Visual Concepts had previously developed 3 Madden titles for EA, Madden 94 and 95 for 16-bit consoles, with 96 getting canned due to programming difficulties with the new Sony PlayStation. In a situation that mirrored their Joe Montana licensing deal back in the 90s, Sega wanted Madden on Dreamcast while still publishing their own football game. But though EA took over Joe Montana Football when Sega couldn't get the job done in 1990, this time Visual Concepts was on track to deliver the goods with NFL 2K. EA remained unbowed. They wanted to be the exclusive sports game publisher on Dreamcast. Sega reportedly offered EA the opportunity to be the only third-party developer of sports games for the system, meaning that it would still publish its own 2K franchise. But EA walked away from negotiations. Bing Gordon, Electronic Arts' then marketing director, was quoted in the press as saying, "Dreamcast can't succeed without EA." As it turned out, Gordon wasn't far off the mark. While Sega and Visual Concepts released NFL 2K and NFL 2K1 exclusively for the system to absolutely rave reviews, it couldn't stave off the onslaught of the PlayStation 2. And EA didn't mend fences with Sega. Madden never appeared on the Dreamcast, but found a happy home on Sony's console. Sega ceased Dreamcast production in March of 2001 after only 18 months. EA's Dreamcast snub wasn't all about ego. They reportedly had legitimate concerns about Sega's decisions prior to the console's launch, such as flip-flopping over whether or not to include a built-in modem, and not throwing in with EA's preferred chip manufacturer, 3DFX. But no matter how justifiable Electronic Arts' beef with Sega might have been, their public stand against the system signified an attitude that had grown at EA after years of unrivaled success. In an email interview with Machinima, former EA Sports designer Ernest Adams explained that the company's outlook had shifted over time as their industry position solidified.
As EA got bigger, the company got rather cocky and inclined to act as if success were its due. It was no longer an eager young company hungry for more. It became a middle-aged success that thought it could do no wrong.
The Dreamcast's demise spurred Sega to quit the console-making game, devoting all of its time to making software. By the end of 2001, Sega and Visual Concepts released NFL 2K2 as one of the Dreamcast's last titles, but it also appeared on the PS2 and Xbox. While other rivals had tried to get a taste of Madden NFL's pie, Sega's new franchise began carving out a serious slice. The 2K series kept pace with Madden and, according to many critics, outstripped it in terms of visuals and gameplay. Sega released critically praised installments every year, even partnering with media giant ESPN in 2003. Then, Sega went in for the kill. They released ESPN NFL 2K5 for the PS2 and Xbox in July 2004. The suggested retail price? A mere $19.99. Releasing a top-tier video game at such a bargain basement cost was unheard of, and gamers knew a great value when they saw it. Compared to Madden NFL 2005's price tag of $49.99, then the industry standard for a new game, NFL 2K5 was too good a bargain to pass up. In fact, only 3 months after its release, EA slashed Madden 2005's price to $29.99, clearly reacting to Sega's strategy. According to one source, a Madden developer summed up EA's response to the $20 tactic succinctly: "It scared the hell out of us." But the fear would be short-lived. In December 2004, Electronic Arts and both the NFL and NFL Players Association signed a 5-year exclusivity contract, guaranteeing that EA Sports would be the only publisher offering real NFL teams and players. While the first Madden titles could get by without the license, by this point gamers wouldn't even sniff at a football game without it. With one stroke of the pen, Electronic Arts dealt a fatal blow to their competitors: Sega's 2K franchise, Midway's NFL Blitz, and 989's NFL Game Day. That same year, EA also signed exclusivity deals with the AFL and the NCAA. All 3 agreements ensured EA Sports' complete football domination through 2009. According to a 2004 GameSpot article, EA had been trying to secure exclusive rights to the NFL license for a few years, and after the deal was struck, it was revealed that it was the NFL itself that made the decision to go exclusive. Electronic Arts was only one of several publishers bidding for the license. But the detail was lost on critics of the contract. Take-Two, NFL 2K5's distributor at the time, said that the deal would do a tremendous disservice to the consumers and sports fans whose funds ultimately support the NFL by limiting their choices, curbing creativity, and almost certainly leading to higher game prices. The next year, Madden 2006 debuted at $49.99. An analyst quoted by GameSpot said out loud what the gaming world was collectively thinking: EA is both evil and really smart. Even Electronic Arts founder Trip Hawkins saw problems with the agreement. Hawkins had left the company in 1994 to start new video game venture 3DO, but weighed in on EA's NFL exclusivity in an email interview with Machinima.
I think it is unfortunate when any fundamental category license can be exclusive or even semi-exclusive. It inhibits competition.
Consumers agreed. In February 2008, EA and the NFL extended their contract through 2012. 4 months later, gamers filed a class action lawsuit against Electronic Arts, alleging that the publisher had the ability to raise the price of its interactive football software substantially for a significant period of time without consumers substituting another product. EA now has a monopoly on the market for interactive football software. Despite reports that the NFL had been the driving force behind the exclusivity deal, the plaintiffs' attorneys argued that EA's similar contracts with the AFL and NCAA proved it had a monopoly on the genre, limiting customers' choices. After 4 years, the lawsuit ended in July 2012 with a $27 million settlement for the plaintiffs. But it was a Pyrrhic victory for gamers. Consumers who bought a Madden title between 2005 and 2012 for Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, or Wii could claim a paltry $195, while Madden games for the Xbox, PS2, or GameCube entitled consumers to $6.79. And while EA agreed to a 5-year moratorium on exclusivity deals with the NCAA and AFL after their current contracts expire in 2014, the settlement still allows them to retain exclusive rights to the NFL license. In fact, that agreement won't end until 2013. No one can dispute the monetary value of holding the reins to one of the most popular licenses in the world. But while the contract effectively ended competition between EA and rival game publishers, Electronic Arts wound up fighting with its own fans instead, both in court and in the court of public opinion. Their hard-fought victory raises an important question: is any contract, even one with the NFL, worth the wrath of your own audience?
When EA and the NFL entered into their infamous exclusive partnership, many gamers decried the way EA Sports' most visible competitor, 2K Sports, was shut out of the football market. But just a year later, in 2005, Take-Two Interactive, the co-publisher of Visual Concepts' 2K Sports games, signed a similar deal with Major League Baseball. The contract ensured that 2K Sports would be the exclusive third-party publisher with video game rights to the MLB license. The main difference between this deal and EA Sports' NFL deal, however, was that the MLB still allowed first-party publishers to pay for the MLB license. The contract was a loss for EA, but didn't turn out to be much of a win for 2K Sports either. While EA Sports' MVP baseball franchise was killed by the deal, critics and consumers seemed to turn on 2K Games' baseball series, with each installment's scores failing to live up to those published before the agreement.
Meanwhile, Sony took advantage of the first-party exemption, creating a brand new PlayStation-exclusive franchise in 2006 called MLB The Show, only a year after the 2K Games deal. In May 2012, amid low sales and poor reception, 2K Games announced during an investor conference call that MLB 2K12 would be the final game made under their exclusive contract. In addition, a new installment in the series was absent from their 2013 schedule of games. However, despite the apparent freeing of the license, EA Sports has yet to announce any resurrection of the MVP baseball series, leaving fans of baseball video games wondering if they'll ever get more time on the digital diamond outside of Sony's consoles. Not all of EA Sports' struggles have been as cut and dry as their rivalry with competitors, though. In 2008, Hall of Famer Jim Brown kicked off what would become a string of lawsuits filed against EA Sports for their use of players' and coaches' likenesses in NFL and NCAA games, such as a class action lawsuit filed by a group of former NCAA football and basketball players. They allege a conspiracy between EA, the NCAA, and the Collegiate Licensing Company to have players unknowingly sign away their rights to royalties for the use of their likeness in EA's games. In May of 2012, a federal judge rejected EA's request to dismiss the suit. Should EA lose in court, it's been estimated that the company could lose $1 billion in damages. Of course, court battles can often simply be chalked up to the cost of doing business. But some of the trials and tribulations EA Sports have faced have come from some unlikely places. The company dominated the market for golf video games once they snagged the endorsement of the sport's biggest modern star, Tiger Woods, in 1998. Its competition fell away, and soon enough, Tiger Woods' PGA Tour was the only serious choice for golf fans. But after nearly a decade's worth of great sales and no real competition to speak of, a problem arose that no one expected. One late November night in 2009, Tiger Woods' personal life exploded across the tabloid headlines when the athlete crashed his Cadillac Escalade into a fire hydrant on his own street, while questions of whether or not he suffered an assault at the hands of his wife swirled. Reports began to circulate of Woods having had multiple extramarital affairs, and he took a brief break from playing professional golf while he sorted out his personal life. When he did return to the sport in April 2010, his performance suffered, and he struggled to regain his spot at the top of the game ever since. The scandals created a PR problem for EA. Where a number of Woods' corporate sponsors shredded their endorsement contracts, Electronic Arts announced in 2010 that they would stand by their man, keeping the golfer's name on their games. But a year later in 2011, Woods' image was taken off the front of the standard edition of Tiger Woods PGA Tour 12, replaced instead with the yellow flag of the Augusta National Golf Club. EA's press release boasted the fact that gamers could play the Augusta Masters Tournament for the first time in the franchise's history, while the collector's edition did offer Tiger on the cover. And as the memory of the scandals have faded, the 2012 installment of the game restored Woods to the front of the standard edition of Tiger Woods PGA Tour 13. All the while, EA Sports Basketball Series had been dribbling along steadily, with new NBA Live installments every year. EA maintained a direct competition with 2K Games' own franchise, NBA 2K, for nearly a decade. However, in late 2010, EA's newest basketball game ran into big problems. The development team working on the franchise had come to EA boss John Riccitiello 18 months earlier, looking to completely revamp the game's engine and controls. The result was set to be a new iteration of the franchise, NBA Elite. According to Kotaku, an earlier build of the game caused Riccitiello to say, "This is about as much fun as I've ever had playing any sports game." Despite Riccitiello's support, the team was having trouble cramming 2 years of work into a little more than a year and a half. But as the game approached its October 2010 release, problems began to mount. A demo was released for PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 in September, and it contained so many glitches that YouTube videos of the buggy animations and gameplay started to surface on the web. The game became a joke before it could even hit the market. With roughly a week before its scheduled release date, EA benched the project. While a few copies of the game managed to find their ways to stockrooms, resulting in an ultra-rare collectible for gamers, EA Sports wound up releasing their reboot of the decidedly cartoonish NBA Jam. EA hasn't released a full NBA game since, shooting instead for a return to form with NBA Live 13
in October 2012. However, not all EA Sports endeavors have met with controversy. Case in point, the company's series of NHL games has continued its yearly release without pause, competing directly against 2K Sports' NHL 2K franchise for over a decade. After 2010's NHL 2K11, which only released on the Wii and the iPhone, 2K Sports took a one-year hiatus from the series in an effort to retool for the future. But in May 2011, 2K threw in the towel, canceling their hockey franchise and leaving EA Sports Series as the clear winner. Even without competition from their biggest rivals, EA has continued innovating with their NHL series. The ability to create a female player was added to the franchise for the first time in 2011's NHL 12, while the next year's NHL 13 features two legends of women's Olympic hockey as playable characters, Team USA's Angela Ruggiero and Team Canada's Hayley Wickenheiser. But it seems as though the final score for EA Sports is something of a tie. Pre-orders for each new Madden game have gone up 25% year over year, while EA Sports franchises are cash cows, continually keeping the company in the black. On the flip side, in March 2012, Electronic Arts earned an unfortunate distinction, being named Worst Company in America by readers of Consumerist.com, a non-profit subsidiary of Consumer Reports. EA earned over 160,000 votes to beat out Bank of America for the ignominious title. Despite its less than stellar place in the hearts of gamers today, it's impossible to deny that the company's legacy transcends consumer satisfaction. Trip Hawkins, the man who founded the company, is satisfied that EA Sports games have become so iconic that a whole generation of professional athletes grew up playing them.
I always wanted my sports games to be good training for kids that wanted to learn the sport, both as players and as potential or real coaches trying to develop new plays. It was very gratifying to see games having a professional impact. Football players or their wives would drop by the EA office to complain about their speed rating. That's how serious it became.
Whatever your feelings about the company, EA Sports is undoubtedly the reigning champ in the sports game business. After all, a wise man once said, "Don't hate the player, hate the game."